Welcome to What Have You, featuring Rachel Jankovic and Rebecca Merkel. This audio is brought to you by Canon Press.
Welcome back to What Have You. I'm Rachel Jankovic.
I'm Rebecca Merkel.
And I think the thing we knew we needed to say today was this needs to be an episode of at least kicking off with our retractions.
Oh, I forgot. It's the big climb down from the trees episode.
I'll go first.
But first we should say it is a kind of a reunion tour in that we are back in our old place behind the Goodwill.
Yeah, we are.
It's beginning to get dark. Perhaps cops will come.
But it's getting dark later in the day than it used to. We've had tons of snow.
It's only 5:30.
So first of all, you all know, if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, that I frequently say to let your ideas die with dignity.
Exactly.
That if you have an idea, act on it so you can find out if it was good or bad. Otherwise, you'll spend your whole life thinking you had a good idea that you never tested. And so I feel like I have to confess here that
I've got two. I have to remember the second one, but I know the first one. Okay. So you go first.
My first big comment is that I let my composting worms die in indignity. and they died, and I didn't know what to do about it, and I never saved them from what was going to happen to them.
Even their poor little bodies probably added to the fertility of your soil.
Yeah,
Rachel.
But their poor little bodies got baked into a briquette because it was, okay guys, you know that we live in a place where it's windy. Well, when we reached the point with the composting goods, it was all in the back porch, and we reached a point where I was done seeing it there, and there were some questions about it, but it was no longer something I wanted in the house. And I feel like some of the questions involved, it wasn't fruit flies in it. It was like, I'm trying to remember the details. It was something that made me Google other life in it was some kind of mites, little spider mites on a red pepper that kicked that off. The red pepper appeared to be what another little pest wanted to get at that got in there. Sure. So then I felt like, okay, it has to be outside now. Because we can't be brewing up an army of mites in the house. No. And I think it meant something that I was doing wrong. Like there was some way I needed to bring back the balance in the worm tank. And I think I tried. I think I was working on it, but I had to put it outside. Well, because it's so windy where we are, I struggled to find a good place to put it. And I ended up putting it like wedged between our house and the stairs, like a place where it could not blow away, where I was like, this will be safe. But what it did was like radiated into a incredible heat because when the summer was happening, that was all. I probably needed to move them to a gentler climb than that spot. And so they were on the western side of our house. So that late summer, like the afternoon bake off was happening on that side of the house. And in that time, I don't know what I was supposed to do. I don't know how you save.
Water it?
Well, doesn't that seem weird to go water your worms?
No, not if they're in a little
but it kind of
shallow
I was
pan.
saying it was clear that I didn't understand what was happening because I couldn't tell, like, what are you supposed to do? Put more garbage in there, or then it will not be. I mean, it just. But the real end came at the time when I forgot entirely about it for a little stretch of time and just cooked them dry into a solid briquette of cast off kitchen goods.
Oh dear.
Dirt, some paper towels, and dead worms.
The thought of where the worm does not die, and you're like, well,
that's not our house.
Did die.
The worms die here, and I did give the container away to someone who will be more responsible with the worm life, which is Aunt Meredith.
She will. She'll do better.
She'll do better than me. But I felt like I got the knowledge out of that I needed, and so I don't resent it.
One of my retractions. I have two.
Okay.
One of mine is also to do with refuse.
Oh, that's right.
I said that I had ordered, or I was about to order, the janitorial grade garbage bags.
You found out.
Well, and I gave an initial report, I think, that it seemed good. Well, basically every day, as Judah's taking the garbage out, he curses the bags that split, that tear, that run. And I'm like, we have 600,000 left, so we'll just get through those.
Let me recommend you start doubling them.
Well, we have to all the time.
No, I mean, double them initially. Anticipate.
That'll get us through them more quickly. But whatever it is, guys, the thing I ordered, but see, I never said what exactly it was.
It's just good to let everyone know, though, that we know we make. Yeah.
Hefty bags, I think, are better than what I ordered from the janitorial supply.
Okay, it's good to know.
The second, possibly more spiritually relevant retraction is that
the non-worm / non-garbage bag retraction.
Everyone and their friend messaged me or Rachel with an all caps, "Tell Becca right now," that the hot tip that wives have no sexual responsibilities to husbands is apparently a thing.
Well, that really made me laugh. The messages that I got that were like, "You are correct. Becca is right." And I felt like a lot of people feel it very.
But a lot of people were like, "No, I'm a member of a 600-person Facebook group who universally devote themselves to this message."
And they're like Christian wives club. And basically, what they say is a husband who wants to have sex with his wife is probably being abusive.
It probably is, for sure. Call the cops.
I thought
basically, it's like celibacy in marriage appears to be a Christian problem.
Yeah, and somebody sent me a great, this is a little apropos of nothing, but I didn't read the whole post. I just saw it was like somebody sent me someone else's Instagram post, and the main image said, "I'm not saying that purity culture universally makes men pedophiles."
Oh my gosh.
Like, what?
Oh my word.
Like that, but the reason I say that is I actually do think those things are connected in the world where people are just bizarrely mouthing off about stuff that has no, where everyone's getting really sloppy and it's getting really...
There's a lot of slop.
But the reason I said that is because one of these messages saying that I was right and Becca was wrong.
Fine, guys. I had a higher view of human nature.
One of these messages was saying, in a Christian, reformed, mostly, wives and mothers group, the overwhelming new counsel to new bride, like counsel from women to girls who are about to get married or just got married, is basically, do not under any circumstances feel pressured to have sex.
Here's my question.
Are you ready? Oh. If your husband pressures you in any way, that's abusive. That this is abusive. And this is my point, is that of course we can all paint a scene in our imaginations where that could be abusive. Like where there could be a truly abusive situation.
If you're an abusive man who's snookered a nice girl into marrying you, is that what we're saying most weddings are?
Yeah, be careful that you didn't marry someone who... And actually, that reminds me of an episode...
Careful, but do be careful before the actual ceremony.
No, I think that's a version of be careful too. The episode ages ago where we talked about my child who cut a hole in a sweatshirt? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that a lot of women do that kind of thing, just being provocative.
Yeah.
I think that this is a weird desire in Christian women to provoke Christian men to the point where they be bad.
Maybe.
And then you assume
Just to see if they
then
will.
you rise upon your moral authority and judge him for the rest of the
I'm
marriage.
sorry, guys. I had a higher opinion of us than this.
I don't believe it.
It turns out I was wrong.
I actually I thought it was very funny because I don't know where I got the sense that this was happening. And
It's probably because you pay attention to those terrible women's ministry blogs, and I don't.
Becca, I don't know of any of those blogs.
Yes, you do.
No.
Yeah.
I think I am like...
You've got 1 foot in the air more than I do.
Well, I've seen more of that apparently than you have.
Well, here's the thing. I know, see, I, of course, was willing to grant you've got your one-off weird problems, but you were making this be systemic, and I was like, no, can't be systemic.
I think
it
is.
Turns out we have a lot of testimonies, guys. It's systemic.
Yeah.
But my question is, in the Christian church then, is marriage simply about being able to jointly file your taxes? Is that what we're celebrating at the reception? What is it about, guys?
I'll tell you what I think that people think that they're celebrating, as I think that it's way hugely sentimental, and that there is
but sentimental about joint tax filing?
Yeah, but I think it's sentimental about. I think it is sentimental about someone honoring you for the
treasure
princess
that you are.
and that any idea, like, this is a thing. This is a real thing, because it's been on my mind in a lot of different ways. But this is a thing. If it would make you angry, the reason that I don't think at a wedding, I think a prenup is a sad thing, because it pre-assumes failure in, it's like going into marriage with a prenup is sad because it assumes so much that you don't really mean it anyway.
It's like this marriage is a disposable solo cup.
Yeah, and so let's make sure that we can get back out of this with as little pain and agony as we're getting into it, apparently. So
we're going to write disposable.
So I think that that's a sad
on
thing.
The package.
So I'm bringing this up because in no way do I think that this would be equally sad, except for apparently more needed, which is to go ahead and loop into the vows things like, I'm expecting you to do the dishes in our house when it needs to be done.
Gosh.
Do you know what I mean? And let me put a disclaimer there. I'm saying it's sad because I'm saying that you cannot assume that a Christian woman is going into marriage with the intention of doing her duty and serving.
No.
And that's the thing that's so sad, because that should be assumed. Mm-hmm. Just as it should be assumed
there's a lot
that
of
a husband would very sacrificially want to help and love his wife through things.
But it's going to assume that what I'm going to do is follow my dreams, and you're going to support me every step of the way.
And that there's nothing in this marriage contract that means I will be a keeper at home.
No, you know what
right?
it is?
Nothing here means that I'll do your laundry pleasantly.
You know how, okay, so I'm sure you said this, but one of the times, one of our children probably clocked another child upside the head. I don't know. But the topic of the golden rule came up. And we're like, let's talk about the golden rule. What does it mean? And whoever the child was, I don't remember, said, do unto others whatever they do unto you. It was like, well, it's a slight modification, but it makes all the difference in the world.
Our kids invented
if you went into this marriage saying, I promise that you will love and honor and cherish me.
Well, but that's exactly it. And because everybody has taken all of the actual weight out of what Scripture says, what this couple is actually vowing to do for each other, you can get away with making up your own vows that amount to saying, you make me feel special.
I vow and promise.
I vow
that you will make me feel special.
I swear for eternity that as long as you do whatever I want, I will stay with you. You know?
No, it's so bad.
It's not good. But my point is, a prenup is one kind of failure. This, I am saying this would be another kind of failure. But what it's failing is that there are grown Christian women getting married whose mothers and communities did not impress them with the importance of obedience and doing your duty. And I'm just
but
to be
they
clear,
don't even know what their role
to God,
is.
Obedience to God, submission to God's word, which would make you realize that in the Christian economy of what a home is, that a woman bears a lot of obligation and responsibility. And in turn, so does the man, and that you're celebrating the making of a completely new economy at a wedding. And it's not just the sexual relationship, it's two people entering willingly into roles,
but without the sexual relationship
that is sealed by that selfless love of the sexual relationship.
But here's the thing, what is a marriage is two distinct parts. One is the vows that were taken publicly before God and these witnesses till death do us part, and the other is the sexual relationship.
Yes.
Without one of those two, you don't actually have a marriage.
Either one of those things can be by themselves, and they are not a marriage.
Right. If you're hooking up with some girl every other week, you're not married to her.
Yes.
If you promise to live with her as a roommate till forever, but you were never going to sleep with her, that's also not a marriage. It just isn't. Those are like the two kind of sine qua nons.
And if you compare it to the church, then you would say that important things, like, so on the one hand you have the preaching of the word, you have the word, the declaration of the word, and things like statements of faith, etc., etc. But then we have the Lord's Supper, we have communion, we have an important, like, and sex in a marriage is like the communion aspect of that household, while there's all these other things, the vows, living like you mean those.
Although you don't want to get too weird.
No, I'm not trying to make any.
She's not making any theological references with that. It's
no,
just
I'm talking about the fact, as a metaphor. My point is that there are different elements. There's actual, and that is just
it is consummation. It is literally consummation of the vows.
Yes, and so you can't act like that was only ever supposed to be one time, and then after that we're completely separate from the fact that this was vows. This is a relationship that's meant to be carried on for the rest of your, like, this is a new way of life.
But
this is a new thing.
It's literally productive, because that sexual union is how you, like, grow the family, like, your family, your name, your legacy, the heritage, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, two people living as roommates, isn't that? It just isn't.
No, two people sharing the grocery bill and evenly splitting the chores, and otherwise not giving themselves freely to one another. Will it's nothing. It's a total dead end. Mm-hmm. And I think that what's so sad about it is that the whole headship and submission relationship, the thing that is so controversial in Christian circles, even, it's so explosive and controversial in places it should not be at all. Like, you're like, how has it happened that we have church ladies going about someone reading Ephesians 5? You have to be like, hang on. I mean,
why are you coming on?
Why
are
you here?
Morning?
Go away. Like, go somewhere where, I mean, like, what are you even
there's
doing?
Probably like a Unitarian Gardeners Club.
I just drove
Go
by.
find out.
I just drove by our local Methodist church that has a LGBT flag on its reader board next to the subject of the sermon. Get thee somewhere that ignores the Bible that much. Like, but stop saying you're a Christian if that's what you feel free to do. And I think that it's really important because the Christian life is so much about death to self and death and resurrection all the time.
But it's
that
never
thing that's
just
so
death.
sad.
It's always resurrection.
Right,
That's
but
thing.
people are so squeamish about that that death. And and in our squeamishness about asking anyone to do anything difficult or hard or something that didn't appeal to them the first time they heard about it, it wasn't their dream to do what their husband asked them to do as regards something. So they're like, and I've known of amazing times where a husband asked for something
mediocre.
Something like, maybe we could have stir fry sometime, and that made
a conflagration.
An offended woman huff off to complain about all kinds of oppression and who does he think he is? And anyways, the reason I'm trying to say is those little deaths that may be about something like stir fry, right? It can be the pettiest thing in the world, which is, I think, how women talk themselves into thinking it doesn't matter whether or not they, like it can be a pretty little issue. So they're like, well, I'll be dumb. I don't want to do it. All this I'm trying to say is that our obstinacy about getting into situations that call for that means that we don't see how beautiful that particular resurrection is.
So here's the thing. In my Brit Lit class, we've been just doing the romantic poets. So Percy Shelley, who is a stunning poet and a hideously evil man, he has the line, his last line of Ode to the West Wind is, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? And the reason he's saying that is because he would like to burn down all of civilization. Right. He wants death universally and winter universally and scorched earth, because only from the ashes could the phoenix rise. So we must have the ashes. Embrace the ashes. That's the only way to the phoenix. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? So bring on the winter, which is exactly what it is. It's Ode to the West Wind, which is the autumn wind. And he's embracing that because it's the only way to spring, right? So that's one kind of Christless and godless resurrection idea. Like death and resurrection. Embrace the death. That's the only way to get to resurrection. I think American evangelicals have fallen off the other side of the horse, and we would like spring with never a winter.
Yes,
like we want to live in this sort of like LA perpetual youth,
a breezy
collagen.
Warm, I think just
spray tans,
breezy warm,
no difficulty,
kind of emotional and sentimental goodwill, kind of like
spring always, guys. Eternal youth.
Yeah,
that's what we
want.
And
lots of great little hot tips from people like, God loves you, so he would never want something for you that would bother you.
And the thing is like,
and you wonder because you do not get the sense that when the Apostle Paul speaks of the Christian life, that's what he thinks is happening. No,
because the thing is the death and resurrection ideal is a very Christian and very profound, like, cycle.
Yeah.
And I think that our winter and spring, our night and day, everything pictures the ultimate reality of death and resurrection. And you have people like Shelley who want to remove Christ, and then they want to embrace the death because that's the path to resurrection. But without Christ,
there's no resurrection.
Takes you to hell.
Yeah.
You're
not actually the end.
You're not coming up again in the spring. You're going to the eternal lake of fire. So that's one problem. But I feel like the squishy, soft, cowardly evangelicals right now want to remove winter completely and live in this balmy breeze all the time,
which actually
and never die to themselves.
I don't know the quote as well as I should, because I'm pretty sure though it comes from a Rutherford, and it's just this great quote about kind of like, well, but we want to go to heaven in our beds. Like, it was like kind of like we want to be carried there cozy in our beds.
Right.
And he just has this great moment where he tears people apart, saying about how, but for a Christian, heaven is gained by, it was all about like the freezing winds in your faces and the hard journey.
Interesting is that actually, now that I'm bringing up all my lit classes, I can't remember if this is in the Iliad or the Odyssey, but I want to say it's the Iliad. Somebody is talking about dying a coward's death, and dying a coward's death is dying of old age or dying of sickness somewhere not on the battlefield, where for anyone with any self-respect, you die fighting. That's how you know that you were a brave person. And if you died away from the battlefield, you died a coward's death. And I think that we, like, there is a pagan nobility that understands life better than we do, which is we should be ready and hoping to die with our boots on.
I need to tell you a little aside, and then I want to come back to this because it's a good topic. When you brought up Shelley, I just wanted you to know that Lena says to me the other day, I mean, do you even like Shelley?
I like Shelley.
And I admit this was what I was like, well, I mean, he was really remarkably good. Like, I mean, you can't deny. And then it came out that Lena has a long harbored grievance against Shelley because one time the speech meet poem she had chosen wasn't long enough, and so she flipped open a book of poetry and picked a Shelley at random that was enough lines.
And it probably said, I fall upon the thorns of life.
No,
I bleed.
It wasn't that one, but it was no, it's funnier. She was like, it was to a skylark. And then she takes off saying it, and we had this moment where I was like, but that's beautiful. And I think she's like, I can't consider it because all I have is hatred in my heart for this moment. But because she started off, hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. And I was like, yeah, that's real good. She's like, perhaps.
Well,
anyways,
I feel like when we get to I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed, I always snicker because I'm like, Shelley, you're a bit self-serious.
Okay,
now.
my kids now they're totally gonna laugh at me about this. Who's the Alfred Proof? T.S. Eliot.
Lord Tennyson?
No, it's Eliot. Hold on, let's see. Alfred Prufrock. My children were the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
Okay.
My kids have discovered that, at least the opening, it's not just them. They and their friends at school, apparently, have been singing it to the tune of a song from Tangled. And it's actually quite funny about, I will wear my white flannel trousers and I will part my hair. And he said about, do I dare to eat a peach? They're like, do I dare to eat a peach? It's something about, I will part my hair behind. That's how it's that they were singing it. I will part my hair behind something. Do I dare to eat a peach? Anyways, it's quite funny about wearing their white flannel trousers on the beach. It's a blessing to have children doing things like this. Okay, but I want to come back to what we were talking about, which is more important than my random poetry anecdotes. Okay, what I was gonna say is Christian women who don't like little deaths, and little deaths are often seen as like women who resist this kind of thing like to think that they would go do glorious deaths.
Yes.
That they'd be totally...
We'd be a full Joan of Arc.
Get me on a mercy ship and let me lay down my life for people without clean water. But if you ask me to please wash these socks before tomorrow... Oh my word.
Bring in the
what? Yeah, but what happens is that you have women who are like imagine a gardening group. Like you start a big gardening group of women, but all that happens is everyone brings the seed packs and then they pour them out and count them and talk about them and get really huffy about anyone who suggests they plant them. Like, if you're going to plant that, you don't love me. Like, that is the most harsh thing. Like, you must not like my seed.
I've been saving my seed.
You don't like my sweet pea seed? Like, have you no heart? It's Eunice all over, isn't it? Have you no heart? And just anger that anybody would not value these things that much.
Yeah, no, I've made a collection of them.
I have a big old collection
I alphabetize them. I have a seed filing box.
Yes, and heaven forfend anyone should ask me to plant these
Plant
somewhere.
it in the dirt where I won't see it anymore.
And then walk away from it.
And it will get cold.
Hover over it.
It will break open.
Yeah. And
shrivel up. Become insignificant.
And lo, something else will happen. What? But I think that's what we have going on in the Christian world.
Oh my word,
is women who have lost their faith in what God does with our obedience, right? Like we've lost our idea of what those seeds are even for, but we think we're curating very faithfully, like we know we're supposed to garden, and we think that we can stop with just the seed collections. And so we end up in just a ridiculous situation where Christian women far and wide are being absolutely fruitless in their homes, in their marriages, they're just self-absorbed seed curators instead of faithful gardeners and planters.
To say it's fruitless, they would point to their collection of seeds and say, how could you say such a thing?
What is even wrong with you that you would say this? I think that whatever is happening in popular culture right now, it is becoming commonplace for women to not even consider planting seeds. No, and not consider telling other people to.
Or to say things like, my husband and I have been married for 3.5 years now, and we're considering sometime in the next 2 years, I'm thinking about planting a seed. Does anyone have any
tips? I'm starting
recommend?
I'm starting to research the idea of putting something in the soil.
Seriously,
sometime.
There's just a
but I think almost always people find it dangerous.
Posts.
Well, and that's the thing I meant is that, like, there's a lot of things that I could think to put. If we imagine that wedding ceremony, that would be very sad. But there's a lot of things that I could think to put. You know, we've talked before in here and laughed about the Puritans and their wrongful attributions of being uptight people. And where that it was a common wedding vow in Puritan times for the wife to promise to be bonny and buxom in bed.
Did we go and check that?
Yeah,
we
did.
We turned out that...
No, we did. We did check it and
did it turn out a real footnote?
Mm-hmm.
All right, just checking.
Yes, no, but that was a thing. Like, that is a thing that used to be actually mentioned in the wedding vows. But if you think of so many things beyond that, what are we supposed to be willing to vow to do, right? To serve, to keep the home, like things like...
And to be the fertile soil of the marriage.
Exactly.
That will grow more people in this group.
More people, and if more people, if God allows, and all kinds of other productivity.
Other fruit.
All the fruit.
As it comes up.
Like crazy abundant fruit in every direction you can imagine. And that whole idea, and Psalm 128, like a vine with fruit abounding. In thy wife, thy house is in thy house, thy wife is found. And one of the things I love is that immediately goes on to say the children are like olive plants, which means that the children are not the only fruit on her vine. She is a wildly productive vine who makes more wildly productive things.
And I just went and cut some sprigs off of a vine the other day that I'm trying to root, and we'll see if it works. But it is so lovely and huge and ridiculous. And it's just taken over the whole back of this building. And it's gone around the sides. And it's lovely. And it has these enormous, huge seed pod clusters that are so beautiful. And every time I drive by it, I'm like,
where did you get this?
I want it. I texted the owner and I was like, this is weird, but would you mind if I snipped off a few things and to see if I could root it?
Which building is this?
Because it's downtown. It's the... Moscow Manor down the back.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
amazing. It's so pretty.
Yeah.
But it's like, and I did text and I did ask permission, but it is so lovely, and it's sitting there in my little vase, and I keep thinking maybe perhaps there's a little bit of a root, but I'm not positive yet. But either way, it is so amazing, and it's the sort of thing that from my little cutting, I hope that it will become something like that. Like just something that is ridiculously overpowering. And it can happen from the tiniest
I just
little
realized
shoot.
We're tying this all in really nicely with my confessions about my worm bin, because one of the things that you just have to realize about to be abundantly fruitful and productive, one of the things that you cannot be afraid of is planting and little deaths. Like the pruning things back.
Well, what is dirt but a lot of death?
Yes, as I was saying, is like the worms and the compost and the pruning things and cutting them back and digging things out, and that work of being abundantly fruitful is not something that is for, and like I think many people want to put their silk flower under a glass cloche and be like, look, see, I am a
that's the
beautiful
thing,
flower. It's
is
like,
that-
well, do you want to be out in the real sun and the real rain and the wind growing something real? Or do you want to just do this weird fake land?
Yeah.
And if your husband comes home sometime and is like, what do you think about maybe something that we could enjoy? Right? Like, how about maybe we could turn this into something more fun? And if that is seen as a
Something
radical
that smells
offense,
like something or tastes
what if
like something.
What if you did something that was worth doing?
The thing is if you look at a real rose that is, you know, one of those incredibly scented, incredibly soft, the kind you just want to stuff your face into,
right?
And keep it there, sort of, versus the little dollar store rose that if you stood,
It smells like dust.
yeah, if you stood 50 yards away and squinted, you might not be able to tell the difference, but any other time you can obviously see it. There are a lot of people who would say, I pick the artificial one because
it's less work.
convenient,
It's less work. Somebody
stays all the time,
told me.
and they'll say, and you can't tell the difference.
Did you see that? Did
Like,
you see
can you
sometimes
not?
someone wrote a very, I feel like it was a meme, maybe it was, I don't remember, I just see it going around, that somebody had faithfully been watering and tending their succulent for like 6 months, and then they knocked it out of the window and the little pot broke and it was styrofoam. It was a fake succulent. They thought that, and
That's really sad.
and she was really feeling like she'd risen above to become a green thumb with this succulent that never changed and never grew, but it strikes me that little moment, that has happened to many Christian men who thought they married a Christian woman who would partner with them in a life that would actually be alive, like in something that would go forward to bear some kind of fruit, and that whenever things come to a head in their marriage, they find out she's actually is just styrofoam. There's no actual.
I'm just pulling from every lit class now, but we're also finishing Pride and Prejudice, and there is this is just a side note, but I don't think that any film or stage adaptation can do justice to it because of all the little things in the narration that Jane Austen is wanting you to see that you can't actually capture in the visual. But one of the things is, I think one of the primary themes of that book is it opens with, how on earth did Mr. and Mrs. Bennet end up together?
Yes.
Like, that is the question that is immediately obvious in the first chapter, is how did that happen?
Yeah.
Because he's a sharp guy and she is a complete ninny.
And he has no respect for her.
No, but also but he's a guy who sees people with accuracy. So what happened here? How did he marry her?
Well, but the whole book explores that because he doesn't see things with accuracy.
Well,
he does and he doesn't.
He sees it. He just doesn't take action.
Same
but
with Elizabeth, who prides herself on her
changes.
smarts. Yeah.
But the thing is it says, actually, I think we're clearly given Mrs. Bennet is the old Lydia, and Lydia is the young Mrs. Bennet. And you're supposed to see how this happened. And it says, there's one line that is amazing that I think every young man should frame on the wall. It's like, he had been taken in by youth and beauty and the appearance of good humor, which youth and beauty generally give. Yeah. And it's the appearance of good humor, because she has no good humor at all. She's fussy and horrible. She's petty and she's self-absorbed. And he didn't see it because he was taken in by the youth and the beauty of it. Yeah. And that is the thing that I think that many men think they're getting good humor. And what they're getting is vivacious blonde, which is not the same thing.
But what they're also getting is like untried. Like a person who's never been put in a situation. Like they just don't actually know their character at all. And I do want to say, I feel like every once in a while we need to say something like this. If you're listening to all this and you're like, my word, they're hard on women and they're not saying anything about how stupid modern men are, that's because we're not talking to the men. And it's also because we don't think it's our business to.
If we did have a thing to say about the men, we could say a lot of things.
The thing we want to say about the men in this context is,
they should have known better than to marry.
They should have known better than to marry someone who wouldn't do that. But if if you think that you might be that styrofoam kind of, if you're like, oh my word, maybe this is at the heart of my problem.
If maybe I want to be a styrofoam succulent because that seems like a better option.
Well, if it just seems like everything I care about is things being the same and being predictable and being easy and being looking good and not being a challenge, then you might see that in yourself. And the point is it doesn't matter even if you think maybe I got into this marriage foolishly and maybe my husband's not equipped to lead me in this way or whatever. Your walk with the Lord, you are responsible for. Like, so whatever the status of the marriage is, we're only talking to you. We're not addressing husbands. But that's not because we don't think that the husbands play a significant role in this.
No, I think a lot of husbands just are getting exactly what they deserve, plus a little dollop of extra justice.
But I do want to say that if this sounds familiar to you at all, or you think, oh my goodness, am I afraid to plant? You know, am I too fearful to be a faithful Christian woman in my everyday life? I would just say, ask the Lord to give you a clear first step. Like, ask the Lord to give you something that you know is a seed in your hand, and instead of treasuring it, you plant it.
And the other thing, I think, spend more time looking at God's creation than at your very highly curated Instagram feed. Because the thing is that we prioritize very different things than God does as a culture. And I think that when we, like, if you're the kind of person who can look at a fake wood grain and say, but see, that's much better than wood because it would stay the same all the time, even though it's Formica, it won't chip, you know, or whatever. If you can look at the fake rose and say, see, I prefer that because it will always be there.
And you could just vacuum it off.
Right, chuck it in the wash. If you are the sort of person who prefers the fake to the real because the real comes with mud and it decays and the leaves fall off and then you have to clean it up, you should ask yourself, what does God prize more? And spend more time looking at what his art is.
There was a time in my life,
and learn from it, because the thing is, the book of Proverbs is all about, look at the ants, look at this, look at the other thing, like study God's creation and then figure out what it says about the artist.
There was a time in my life, it's been a while now, I'm realizing, bringing this up, how much I feel like, wow, God really did break some things out of me. Like you're like, it's not that my life is not this way now, it's that I'm over this problem. But in the early phases of my mothering career, when it was like a whole lot of little people all at one time in my house, I think I just felt like a godlier way would be minimalism. Like a godlier way.
Sometimes it is.
A godlier way seemed to me to be a Zen garden. Like a little something with no mess on it. Yeah. Like a bonsai tree, perhaps, somewhere. Delicately clipped.
On a windswept
But there can't
hillscape.
be... Yeah, but my heart was like longing for something. And this is funny because that's actually not, stylistically, that's not even what I would normally choose. So I know that it was a spiritual crisis of some kind. It has to have been. Because the thing that
It's like a heart that pants for water when heated in the chase.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, if I let my mind go to, like, what do I wish this was being like? Like, what was the thing I wanted, kind of. It was to make everything could it just be clean, and could we just not have this much carnage after we eat one meal at the table? Like, I remember it was probably in the phase where I thought it seemed like a good idea to just have a drain on the floor under the table so that you could just like hose the dang thing off.
I wanted my children to have like little jumpsuits made of tarps.
Yeah,
that I could hose off.
Just like we have to just. What can we do? Car wash? I mean, like, how can we make it not like this? That was my overarching feelings. But at that time, we were in this house, and when you were saying, look at the natural world.
Yeah.
And I think it was entirely God's good sense of humor that this house that we were in was imitating our indoor life outdoors. Like, there was an apple tree out there that had not been pruned in way too long.
Yeah.
So it produced a great many apples way up high where nobody could reach them.
Yeah.
And then
They
they
would fall
all
down
fell
and
and rotted
bruise.
in one moment. So all at one time you have 350 pounds of rotten apples and yellow jackets in the corner of the... And this is in one corner. Moving to the right, you run into the world's largest Bing cherry tree, which also produced endless cherries, deeply out of touch with where anybody could pick them, and then threw cherries. Now that's really something you can't pick up. All over, just a huge amount of carnage there, and that would just smell like wine, and the kids would track in smears of cherry juice. Then there was a pear tree, also unpruned and way too tall, so the pears would fall down when they'd already started to rot on the inside.
Yeah.
That brewed up so many fruit flies for us that we cut it down. It was such a bleak pear tree situation. And then there was a plum tree in the backyard that also made hay when the time came. And then in the front yard we had an enormous oak tree that it was the kind that don't drop their
Rained
leaves.
down acorns.
Yeah, so many acorns that so many. And it was like this squirrel mecca out there. So, I missed one from the backyard. The black locust tree, which dropped these like foot-long black pods all over the yard. And the squirrels would shuck those on the back porch. Like they would eat them like, it was like a squirrel stadium.
Popcorn stand.
Yes, it was our back porch was like squirrels shucking pods and bringing acorns. And then in the front yard, this oak tree was the kind that don't drop their leaves until the new ones come in.
Yeah.
So it would be brown leaves all over the tree in the front yard, and then as soon as spring comes, brown leaves all over the ground. And then there was one other kind of a tree that I can't remember what it was. It dropped those big hairy pods all over the driveway, and they were like crunchy. I want to say it was
And then you start to sympathize with C.S. Lewis's Philostrato, who wants a metal tree.
Yes, but it
flip on
actually,
the switch and the birds sing.
and I think what was so good about it to me was that all of those things are things that I knew I loved in theory. Right? I love an apple tree, love a cherry tree. Love a pear tree, but we can't live like this, Luke. Like, I think my feeling was like, we're gonna die with a yard that is doing this to me. And it was inside and outside. And either way, I'm saying there was a lot of moral lesson in in God's creation for me, because you had to notice that God is not precious about, like, when things are fruitful, it's mess. Like where no oxen are, the crib is clean.
Yeah.
But much strength is by the increase of the ox.
Is actually, you actually do need to tend those things, or like you're saying, you'll have a ridiculous and useless pear tree that you have to cut down. Because you can have the blessing and you can have the productivity, but if it's not tended and it's not taken care of, and it's like, if you aren't there being the master of the situation, it will go to seed and it will rot and it will be not worth it, and it will get cut down.
It will do nothing but farm you up some fruit flies.
Right.
But at the same time, my point in that is just that it confronted the idea that God would be more pleased with a kind of barren sterility in
a nice artificial hedge.
Right. Like, wouldn't it have been better if we could just put up some fake?
But the truth is, he has all kinds of beauty.
I know, but in this particular way, God did not call.
But fruitfulness never comes without mess.
That's what I was going to say, is that God did make all kinds of different beautiful landscapes and scenery.
The Sahara
and things.
is a real kind of beauty.
He did that. But
it
it's also
doesn't
not
produce
it's not what he means when he says your wife will be like a desert. That doesn't happen.
No.
She'll be like a desert with an occasional cactus.
But it'll be scenic.
But otherwise only poisonous spiders. Or the world's most deadly snakes. She'll be like that. Or instead, when he says she'll be like a vine with fruit abounding, that is not the picture of some kind of wind-blown wilderness somewhere. It's a picture of a tended garden that's there to produce.
And I think that's the key, is the tended. It has to be both tended and a garden. Like, it has to not be a pretend garden, but it has to also be one that somebody cares about and is paying attention to and is pruning it and is harvesting it and is got their eye on it.
Totally.
Because otherwise it just goes to rack and ruin, and that's not good either.
Yeah. We should move on to our tips. I have a tip.
Do you?
I'm so proud of myself.
Mine's hefty bags.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Mine is, give your worm composter to a neighbor that will do a better job with it. Okay. But no. Back up. Maybe if you know this already and you do this already, I'm going to struggle with some resentment.
Okay, all right.
This is a product that I have been aware existed probably almost my whole life, but have never gone to the trouble of grabbing hold of it with both hands and purchasing it and bringing it home. And when I did this week, Becca, I felt like
everything turned around.
The world needs to know. There are upholstery tacks that are like a screw on the end. Okay. Like, so it's like it's like a corkscrew. It's sort of like a tack with a grabbable top, like just a push tack, but with a corkscrew pin on the bottom. You can purchase these handy doodles. I got mine on Amazon. And then you can go around and screw them into your dust ruffle so that it never budges from the place that you put it.
Rachel?
And I've been living a life where my dust ruffle changes its opinion about where it goes. And for whatever reason, I think I always thought this was a failure to make standard bedding sizes. Because you get a king dust ruffle. Why does that fabric have to hang off 6 inches on both sides? So then you stuff it under the mattress or whatever, but it's going to come out.
Droops out.
Yeah, and then it sags off the end, and then you accidentally step on it, and you make it all look like a big higgledy-piggledy problem. But I'm just telling you, you can buy these things, and apparently they're recommended for, slip covers and stuff. Like, any place where you want something to stay where it is, you just screw it in.
Well, see, that's good to know, because I actually...
You don't use those?
I have somewhere in my house, like a T-bar kind of a pin. It's like a...
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's like a push pin, but with a T top.
Yeah.
And I know that I have a pack of those, and I was going to stuff those down into my box spring.
No, you don't want those, because those will pull out easily. I mean,
But under your box spring, it would really have to work its way to come out. But anyway, I was just saying, that's what I was going to do when I redid my bedding. But I couldn't find the box, and I couldn't bring myself to order more because I knew I had one already.
I think they're called upholstery tacks.
Well, it's good to know.
But you could use them in a lot of situations, because if you, it's just a grabbable top, and you just screw it in, and because it is this little curly-Q corkscrew of a tack, it just goes right in.
See, I love this. I love this as
So, guys, big tips. I bet you have some saggy fabric somewhere in your house.
I'm back in the... Spring break is coming, and I have to use that time to have a real surge and finish my bedroom, because over spring break, I'm trying to get my curtains done, and I'm trying to do an upholstered headboard. That's my next my next project for in there. Curtains, headboard. And while I have everything off, maybe I'll throw some of those pins in my dust ruffle.
Get it? I didn't even have to take my mattress. I didn't even have to take my mattress off to do it.
The thing is custom, sort of I made my dust ruffle to fit my box spring. So I'm hopeful that it's stayed put so far. But I know what you're saying about the others, because
so I also bought a new dust ruffle, which I really like, because I wanted one that was not so floofy. I wanted one that was heavier. It's like quilted. Yeah. It's it's a heavier one. But the problem is it's not exactly the height that you want it, and then and so this is what drove me.
That's why I did mine, because I have my box spring on those bed risers so that I can fit stuff under the bed.
Yeah.
Because it's a small room, and no dust ruffle is the right length for that.
Yeah.
Which is annoying.
Well, that's my big tip, guys. Change your life with upholstery tags.
I used to have that Matt Lizzie bedspread on there, and Dottie would come in and rub herself on it, on those little nubs, until she just rubbed all the fringe right off. That's why I had to, like, stop and, you know, like, we have to cope with this, because she just comes in and runs back and forth on the end of my bed. But the problem is she's gotten in the habit. So now, even now, it isn't actually a nubby bedspread at all. She still comes in and runs back and forth. And so she's kind of, I have a box pleat in the duster vault, and she's curling one edge of it back.
You need to make, Dottie, you need to get her some kind of a little textured wall hanging for
Maybe I can just stab a piece of carpet onto my wall with those upholstery tacks.
We got the answers. All right, guys. Until next time,
have fun.
go plant some seeds.
Do it.
Of all kinds. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.